Hello there, welcome to episode 77 of Never Mind the Bullens. It's your bite-sized Everton podcast and vodcast. I'm Mike Peters. What a few days we've had as Evertonians. We've been through the ringer in every conceivable way. So we're going to try and go through it bit by bit. We'll do it chronologically. We'll get to the game last night at the end, the culmination of a fairly epic few days. Starting on Thursday, just after I'd recorded episode 76, Farhad Moshiri came out and announced how he was feeling, really. But I have issues with that, namely the manner in which he did it and the organ with which he used to, express his feelings, namely talk sport. Nothing against them, specifically, or Jim White for that matter. Jim White is a journalist. He's done his job there, getting a scoop, which he can share. But when you own a football club, I don't understand why you wouldn't use the communications arm of that football club, their organs of that organisation that you own, in its entirety, pretty much, to actually communicate with the fans who are screaming and wanting answers. Why would you use, when you've got 2.5 million Twitter followers plus, Instagram, Facebook, all of these communications methods, why would you not use those channels to communicate your message rather than doing it via text message with a national radio presenter with a far smaller audience than the number of people that of fans that follow the club's platforms on Instagram? And that's who you want to talk to. You don't want to go through the echo chamber of the national media. Go straight where things can be manipulated or twisted. Not that I think they were, but why? I don't understand that. So we've got to find a better way to communicate that, our message to people. And I'll return to that exact point because it was illustrated again quite spectacularly on Sunday. So what he came out and said was, to suggest that it was just injuries that are the issue is he's either obfuscating or trying to spin a line to us. But if he actually thinks that's the case, then he misjudged things spectacularly, or he's incredibly naive, one or the other. We can only wait to see on that one. And obviously there was a lot of things, pieces written and all the rest of it. And then we had a couple of days of just a lot of obviously briefing from within the club about from certain players. Obviously there were some good pieces written, obviously a lot of reaction, the club in crisis, and the media loves that story because there has to be a club in crisis every single week. So if it wasn't us, it was going to be somebody else, and somebody had to take the mantle off Newcastle, didn't they? So it might as well be us. But yeah, a lot of pieces written, a lot of stuff, and you're thinking the place is leaking like a sieve, really. And that's not great. That needs to be addressed as well from a communications standpoint. Then we get, obviously, into the weekend. There were bits about, obviously, Rafa Benitez. Half the board wanted him gone, half the board wanted him to stay, which could have crystallised where we are in terms of there's a lack of cohesion at the top of the club. There's no sort of there's no unity, really, seemingly. There's a lot of seemingly factions and all the rest of it, and everybody's trying to pull in different directions. And then it ends up with Marcel Brands leaving on Sunday. Now, the way that was communicated was absolutely farcical as well. Stories were coming out mid-afternoon. It started to come out from various organisations like The Athletic and BBC Sport, etc. The club eventually puts out a statement at midnight on Sunday night, which is just ridiculous. And before that statement had even come out, obviously wording had to be agreed and so on and so forth, and whatever the delay was, it was pretty epic. But that was, and the briefing started against the club from Brands as well, because I think from his point of view, he probably thinks, hang on a minute, I'm being made the scapegoat here, and this is not all down to me. In fact, he said that to the fan that remonstrated with him after the derby on Wednesday, and he said, is it just the players? Is it only the players? And I thought, well, it's interesting, isn't it? It's telling that there's obviously a disconnect at the top of the club, which was seen illustrated again and again and again. And he is thinking, well, why should I be the scapegoat for this? He talked about the Wilfried Zaha boondoggle, the even bigger boondoggle that was the Alex Iwobi deal. Seemingly neither of those were his brainchild. They were seemingly from Farhad Moshiri, and they thought, if you've got a manager that wants to sign players, a director of football that's wanting to sign particular players, and then an owner going over the top of that and going, right, well, I want these players. Well, you're not the coach. You're not the director of football. You've hired this man to be the director of football, so let him do that. Let him direct the football. So I have some sympathy with Marcel Brands. I think the director of football model for Everton has not worked for a whole plethora of reasons. Not all of them are linked to Marcel Brands at all, but when we've changed managers so many times, there's been such a lack of continuity, then, that's going to hamstring him a bit. But obviously I think had the summer not played out in quite the way that it did, in terms of obviously he was given a new contract in April, so they were happy with him 6, 7, 8 months ago. Then obviously Carlo leaves in the summer, when probably they had actually worked together a bit. Obviously Carlo got the players he wanted in last summer, and therefore Rafa Benitez clearly didn't want him. Then you're hamstrung by the FFP thing, which obviously was illustrated by the Wilfried Zaha story, which goes that we didn't have any money and suddenly we're bidding money for Wilfried Zaha. Ditto, the same thing happened to Ben Godfrey, where we suddenly didn't have any money, we were told, and then we found 25 million quid down the back of the sofa, and we've bought him. More of him later, by the way. So it's all a dreadful mess. In the midst of all this, of course, on Friday, so I'm cocking the chronology up completely here, but on Friday, Rafa comes out and does his press conference, and I watched it and burst out laughing when, obviously, the questions were about the derby, and he suggested that we'd won all the sprints. Well, that's like saying, you're the nicest guard in prison, because it doesn't matter if you win the sprint. It doesn't matter if you're the nicest guard in prison. The bottom line is you're still a prison guard. You know what I mean? That's a completely ridiculous thing. And as somebody said to me at the match last night, Joseph, who I was sitting next to, said to me, he said, well, we did only have 30% possession. So the statistic there slightly skewed somewhat by that. I thought, yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable point to have made. But who cares if you win all the sprints? If you lose by 4-1, you're absolutely demolished. And Liverpool were able to play in second gear for most of the game, so no wonder we allegedly won all the sprints. But that was Martinez-esque, that one. I burst out laughing and I thought, oh, good grief, he's lost it here. He really has. Then we come to the game last night. Of course, Luca Dean, we thought injured, but actually not dropped. And it seems that he was one of the people that was briefing outside, or certainly his agent was anyway, briefing outside the club how unhappy he is. But I don't think he was unhappy with the way that Rafa was playing. I think it's a bit of that, but also, I mean, if he should be unhappy with his own form, because he's been rubbish this season. But then this again goes into the thing about letting players go and not having enough cover, letting Niels and Nkunku go out on loan when, if Luca Dean's out of form, there's nobody to challenge him. And I discussed this in the last episode. You've got players out of form there with no competition. Well, that's down to the management of the club in terms of letting players go out on loan to ease the wage bill and then leaving the squad short. That's what we've done. Ben Godfrey has to play left back. Ben Godfrey was absolutely outstanding. Obviously, we have the 27-minute protest, which didn't really happen. And I wasn't. I agree with the sentiment, but I don't necessarily agree with the methodology. I don't think walking out and not supporting the team is the right way forward. That's what other clubs do. But clubs will have a far deeper. I mentioned Newcastle before, and I'm not picking on them, but they've had that where they've had to do that but there's been such a massive hatred, a mutual hatred almost, a mutual loathing between them and their previous owner, Mr. Ashley. That's the way the only way. I mean, he didn't communicate with them at all, never mind through Talk Sport. So at least we have that. So I think it's just not the way that Everton needed to behave, and it's not the way the fan base necessarily needed to behave. And it was called quite polite. A couple of hundred people walked out. If they want to do that, that was up to them. Most of them, they all came back after half time. I don't think anybody left, as far to my knowledge. But it was all quite well. We agree with the sort of the way forward for the club. We agree with what he wants to do in terms of that. We both want the same thing. Well, then why are we protesting? Let's work together. But I don't think anybody inside the club wasn't already aware of the fans' frustrations. That was quite clearly visible last Wednesday night. Whether that was a reason for Farhad Moshiri to be there last night, I don't know. We'll never know. But he was. And he got to see really battling performance, a lack of belief at points in the game, because Arsenal weren't that weren't that good. They're not that good, and we could have really got at them. Again, I question the selection in terms of a lack of a third midfielder, because Abdoulaye Doucouré was a bit nullified in the first half because we were having to play deeper, and a game that was there for the taking in midfield, because Arsenal have been a bit powder puff in midfield for a number of years, with likes of Granit Xhaka and his ilk there. I've never rated him. I always thought he was a bit of a fancy handbag of a footballer, really. And he'd probably hit you with it, to be fair, because that's the type of player he is. And he got his obligatory booking. But the game was there, but we didn't seem to believe. But Arsenal created nothing. Then we get a goal. Richarlison scores a good header, but it's offside. It's a goal probably in days of yore before VAR, where that probably would have counted. Because there was a defender on the near side, on the side of the paddock, who probably was playing the Bullens Road, who was playing him on to the eye, but it wasn't given. Then you have the sucker punch then right on half time, right in injury time, that Arsenal scored with their first meaningful attack, quite honestly. And then the second half starts again, another goal. Richarlison's toenail was offside. And you're thinking, it's going to be one of those nights. It really is. We're going to battle, and ultimately we're going to get absolutely nothing. The Arsenal play acting was ridiculous, and ultimately it came to cost them because of the 6 minutes of injury time. There was a bit of consternation on the terraces at half time, thinking how on earth was there only 2 minutes stoppage time at the end of the first half when there'd been at least two fairly lengthy injury delays. And then Damari Gray cuts in, brilliant header for the equaliser. Aaron Ramsdale gets that little tip onto the crossbar, and Richarlison's a fantastic header to be able to control it from 15 yards or so. It's very reminiscent of Paul Rideout, actually, in the '95 Cup final. How prescient to be talking about that, but to control that header back in. And, there were a couple of moments, and the fans and the supporters were clearly geeing each other on. There was the Ben Godfrey tackle akin to Phil Neville against Ronaldo all those years ago in the first half, which got everybody going, and the players were sort of waving their arms at the crowd to get us going, and we were trying to gee them up as well. And what was gratifying about the protest in the 27th minute was the fact that there was actually, most people stayed and cheered and clapped and chanted and all the rest of it to get behind the players, because that's the thing. We've always supported the team, irrespective of whether we've supported the way the club's been run. We've always supported the team. That's why protests of that nature aren't necessarily what Everton is about, past, present, or future. After the equaliser, there was a few minutes there where we were really on top, and then it just kind of fizzled out. Got a slice of luck with Eddie Nketiah hitting the post from a yard. Absolutely should have scored that. And then obviously we get into the 90th minute. Andre Gomez, I've been critical of Andre Gomez many a time on this podcast, because he's just flattered to deceive. It's so frustrating because he's the player that we signed suddenly re-emerged last night. The sort of player we had on loan that first season. He was fantastic last night. His close control was excellent. His use of the ball, he was energetic. He drove forwards, used the ball well, and it added that extra body in midfield. And thinking, well, maybe if that's the way we need to use him, to have that three in midfield, and created the opportunity into Damari Gray. And then, as I'm right down the barrel of that shot, which half a yard, it looked like it was going to bend wide, and then suddenly in the last 6 yards, it suddenly somehow bent in, and of course pandemonium breaks out on the terraces, and the everybody goes absolutely bananas. Rodar Luck again with that Aubameyang chance in the last minute, and maybe that's the bit of luck that we needed last night, and we got it. And the contrast couldn't have been more stark between the agony last Wednesday and ecstasy last night, and the way we left the ground last night with people, thousands of us chanting as we were walking down the Bullens Road and down Gladys Street towards the Holy Trinity statue, and it was wonderful. It was an almost that's a soap opera because of sort of the correlation street, we would call it, between the correlation between the players and the fans and the club and the fans and the management and the players and everything. All the aspects of it just seemed to, I wouldn't say come together necessarily, but it was sort of, there was more of it last night. than we've seen, obviously, for quite some time. Now, a bit of context, it's one win. Let's not get carried away. We've got to go to Palace on Sunday and get something. Chelsea's going to be difficult, but Leicester at home are beatable, so we have to use this as a springboard to try and regain a bit of form and start to climb the table, because although we've picked up a few points, climbed a few places last night, obviously we're still in mid-table. It's not where we want to be. Yerry Mina's obviously injury is a disappointment. That was a surprise to see him on the team sheet at all. That was a gamble that has backfired a little bit, and I've been critical of Rafa's team selection. I can criticise that. Can't necessarily criticise Luca Dean if they've had a falling out, and Luca Dean probably deserved to be dropped just based on his form. But that gamble of putting Mina in has backfired somewhat. Mason Holgate came in when Mina went off, did okay. Still a couple of heart in mouth moments. Alan ran round like a man possessed. He seemed to get more energetic as the game went on. Richarlison was absolutely magnificent, as was Ben Godfrey. Seamus Coleman did well, apart from not cutting out the cross for the goal. But what was great was that at the end of the game, obviously players coming up and smacking chests and cheering with the supporters, and there was a real togetherness certainly between the players and the fans, and that's what we want. That's all we've ever wanted as Evertonians. We want to see that they fight for the shirt, and Richarlison's post afterwards on Instagram, I think, pretty much summed that up. He said, "If you love the what's on the front of the shirt, the players will remember the name on the back." Sums it up. Whether he wrote that quote or not, I don't know. He probably didn't, but it's a great one, and he was absolutely superb last night. So, on to Palace on Sunday. Let's try and get something, start to climb the table, and let's hope for a more positive week as Evertonians. This has been a Top Content production. You can get in touch via our Twitter at NMTVPod or nmtvpod@gmail.com until episode 78 after the Palace game. Let's keep the faith, because come on England, Ashes start tonight. I'm wearing my England hoodie, and come on you Blues.